Hi, welcome to the Joi of Sewing. I'm fashion sewer Joi Mahon. Now, if you've been following along all of our episodes in this series, you're learning all kinds of nuggets about how you will sew, and especially if you're a beginner. We've just recently learned about patterns and we're going to be jumping into fitting them. Now, we're going to really quick though talk about taking body measurements. If you already know this, then you can probably go ahead and skip ahead to our next episode. But if not, let's just take just a couple minutes and understand how we actually take body measurements. We all kind of have our own mannerisms when we're taking our measurements. So let's just use our mannequin right here. And your commercial patterns that you're using are going to have you pick your pattern based on your full bust, your full waist, and your full hips. Sometimes you'll address some length measurements in there. Well, let's see what that looks like on the body. Before we point those areas out, I just want to take my tape measure and pull this around my body. Now, the key when you're taking body measurements is to not pull so tight that you're skewing the number, making you much smaller than you actually are. The body's very pliable, kind of squishy. It's got flesh on it. So when you want to take the body measurements, if it's too tight, then the garments you make are not going to fit very comfortably. So my rule of thumb, if I can get a hold of my tape measure here, is that when I take a body measurement, I wrap the tape measure around the body, and I usually leave 1 or 2 fingers underneath the tape measure. That gives me just a little bit of wiggle room in the pattern measurement. I don't want to add inches and inches, but again, that little bit of wiggle room just allows for some fluctuations in the body, because as we all know, it's a moving object depending on what we've eaten and various reasons. And so then when we go to our garment and we actually sew a pattern, we've got a little wiggle room in there to work with. When we take areas of fit on the body, as I mentioned, the bust, waist, and hips are key areas of measure because that's how we're going to make our patterns fit. The full bust is the area that goes right around the fullest part of the bust, as it says. Now, before you take this measurement, it's very, very important that you have the correct foundation garments on underneath. So if you're wearing a bra, you need to make sure that the straps are pulled up and so that you're in an upright position and that the girls aren't sagging. I can't tell you how important that is for a consistent fit throughout the sewing process. If you're changing that up every time you're putting your garment on and off, you're never going to have consistent fit. So again, the undergarment is such a key. All right, so when we take the full bust measurement, we're going to take the tape measure and we are going to go all the way across the fullest part of the bust. Leave a finger or 2 underneath there, and I would wrap around and I would just kind of go around and eyeball that this is level, parallel to the floor. And then again, over the fullest part of the bust and across the fullest part of the back. The waist is an interesting measurement because we often wear our jeans and pants lower than our natural waist. When you start a sewing project, you should always measure your natural waist. That does not mean the finished garment has to go all the way up to your natural waist, but for consistency during the fitting process, it's really important. I always learn to do I'm a little teapot. So if you hold your hand out and bend to the side, usually where your body or your torso bends is a really good indicator of where your natural waistline will be. Here's a tip, it's not always parallel and doesn't always land on your navel. Sometimes it does, but not always. So just looking at your little belly button there may not be the actual location for your waist. All right, the other area to measure is the hip line. Some patterns indicate that the hip line on the pattern is 7 to 9 inches below the natural waist, but it's important to understand that on your body, it might be higher, it might be lower. Just understand too that when you put the tape measure around your body, you want it to go across the fullest part of the hips on the side of the body, possibly the front if you have a little bit of a tummy or an abdomen, and then across the fullest part on the back. One little tip I'm going to throw out there before we finish is that you can treat the front of the body separate from the back because take the hips, for example, you might be wider across the abdomen, and then maybe on the back side, maybe your derriere sits a little bit lower. So it is entirely possible that from front to back, that full hip line might be different. So just be aware of that. You can do some adjustments on your pattern, which we'll see in our next pattern lesson, but this is just a really good foundation for taking body measurements, Make sure that they're in the right location, that you hold your tape measure taut, but not too tight. Comfortably snug is how I like to describe it, and you'll be well on your way to accurate measurements. Join me in our next episode as we actually take our measurements to the pattern and make our pattern fit.